All right. So we have been talking about art of the Middle Ages, and today we're going to talk about a special kind of art called Byzantine art. This word is Byzantine. Now here's our timeline. As you know, ancient Greece and Rome, which you're studying in history, ended and brought in the Middle Ages, like we talked about last time. And the Byzantine time period is basically the entire Middle Ages and even a little bit into the Renaissance. It's down here from the fall of Rome, which was the beginning of the Middle Ages, until the fall of Constantinople, which is in the middle of the Renaissance. Now, last week when we talked about the Vikings, they overlapped a little bit. But the Byzantine Empire happened in a different part. So this is a map of Europe. England, with the Viking invasion, was up here. And we have France up here, Spain here, and all of this red is what's called the Byzantine Empire. You'll notice that includes this country that you know as Greece. So, the Byzantine Empire was very into creating art for religious purposes in their churches, and their churches looked like this. So we have here a brick exterior. The interior is very detailed. They have a lot of mosaics. Sometimes the mosaics are on the ceilings. We'll talk about what mosaics are, but for now, just know it as art. And what I want you to think about is the fact that their churches are stone and brick, whereas the other Viking churches were wood. Think about why we said that was, and how that might connect with the differences in the art and the purposes of the Byzantine people. Now here's the most famous Byzantine artwork, and it's an example of a religious figure. This particular religious figure, this is called Christ Pantocrator, and so this is representing the religious figure of Christ, and icons of saints or other religious figures were important throughout many churches in the Byzantine Empire. This particular mosaic was in a building called Hagia Sophia. This word that I'm highlighting right here is Hagia Sophia, and it's considered one of the finest mosaics of its time. So the Hagia Sophia is a church in Turkey. It is a beautiful, big church, and it has gone through quite the crisis of identity, let's say. This is the Hagia Sophia from the outside. This is the Hagia Sophia from the inside. Now, when it was built in 537, the Hagia Sophia was built to be a Christian cathedral. And it was a Christian cathedral for about 500 years during the time of the Byzantine Empire. And then, about year 10,054, a specific type of Christians, the Greek Orthodox, they decided to take the Hagia Sophia and that it was theirs now, and it was no longer a generic Christian cathedral. And so it belonged to the Greek Orthodox Church for 200 years. And then, after they owned it, the Roman Catholics were like, hey, no, we want it, it's ours, because there's a lot of wars going on, and people changing ownership and things like that. So it belonged to the Catholics for 60 years. And then after that, the Greeks were like, hey, we want it back, it's ours. We still remember when our grandparents had it, give it back. The Greeks took it back, by the way. That's when they made the mosaic that we were looking at. And so the Greeks had it for another 200 years until the Islamic Empire marched in. And the Islamic Empire said, how about we take it? You can see in this picture there's a lot of these decorative words. These are actually Islamic. So this is from the time that the church was owned by the Islamic religion. And then, so it was an imperial mosque for 500 years until 1935, when the Islamic people thought, you know what, a lot of religions have felt that this church was important to them. Let's just make it into a museum. so everyone can come see it. This is what it looked like back when it was a mosque, by the way. And so this amazing building has been fought over and fought over. Now, this is the full mosaic as it exists today. You'll notice there's a lot missing. And it has a lot to do with that history that I showed you. The fact that people kept taking over the church and replacing things and deciding it was theirs and not theirs. And so a lot of it's missing. A lot of it has been removed. Now, there's another part of Byzantine art that I love. So icons. We have mentioned that most of Byzantine art features religious figures. Now this is called the Cambria Madonna, and I love the story of this painting. It was painted on wood, and it was given to the Cambrai Cathedral in France in 1440. Okay, that's important. That's where it gets the name. Now, the painting is very Byzantine. The style is extremely Byzantine. In fact, they can tell the materials used, the type of painting, the colors used. This was made in 1340. It was made in Byzantine time, but the person who gave it to the Cambrai Cathedral told them that it was made by a person named Saint Luke. Now, if you are familiar with the Bible, you might know who St. Luke is. If you're not familiar, let me just tell you that St. Luke was alive in year 0. So this painting that was clearly made in 1340 was passed off to be a painting that was 1,400 years old, even though it definitely wasn't. But guess what? People believed it. They believed it so much that people, including the King of France, would travel all from Europe just to see this painting. And if you think people traveling to see the painting is a lot, just wait until you see the kind of special treatment they gave the painting. They treated this painting like it was God, like it was royalty. And they made an entire section of the church just for this painting. All of these statues are here to look at the painting. These candles are here to look at the painting. This incredible stand is so that people can honor and look at the painting. This teeny tiny little thing right here, that's it. That's the Cambria Madonna. And everything you're seeing in this photo is to celebrate this, which is a fake. It was definitely not painted by Luke in year 0. Now, in Byzantine art, there is more than just Christian art. For example, this is icon of the hospitality of Abraham. It is still religious, but this is from Jewish art. And it's important to note that one of the things they liked to do in Byzantine art was make the style look more modern. So the story takes place 2000 BCE, but the architecture, these buildings behind the characters, and the table setting, the food that they're eating and the way the table is set up, this is very common of the year that it was made in medieval Europe. So it was just kind of their style. But also notice what material is constantly used throughout? Gold. Lots and lots of gold. They loved gold. And they loved to create mosaics. This is an example of a mosaic. A mosaic is art made from cut gems and precious stones that are then put into the wall itself. So the art is not painted, but instead pieced together piece by piece. This woman is a very good example of a mosaic. You can see the halo behind her is little pieces of gold. Her face is little pieces of ivory and other alabaster stones that are white and lovely. She has little black and green gems making up her clothes. You can tell that they're all cut. And a lot of the other examples we've looked at today have also been mosaics. Here we have another example of a mosaic and another example of Byzantine art. You'll notice everybody here has a halo. Sometimes we think of halos as circles on top of their heads, but in the Middle Ages, halos were represented as circles behind their heads. And you can also see that it's very Byzantine because you can see closely that it is a mosaic. These people are made with stones. The shading is because they use dark and light, different colored stones. Now, another thing that I love about Byzantine art is that it looks really, really, really weird. Really freaking weird. Especially their babies. And there's a lot of babies because a lot of people wanted to show Mary and baby Jesus. But the thing is about this poor baby is he usually looks like a freaky old man. Here we have Mary, who herself doesn't look too great. She looks like she's seen better days. And it looks like she's holding this like miniature 40-year-old. In this one, Mary looks very distressed. And I don't blame her because it looks like her son has a broken neck. The way he's sitting and the way his foot is. That's a creepy looking foot. And this Mary, look how tiny his face is. This baby has a face that is smaller than Mary's nose, and his hair is like 2 times the size. And the way he's sitting and his anatomy, and look at that creepy hand. Good grief, what is happening to this poor child? Now you have to remember, they weren't getting credit. Art in the Middle Ages was weird because people weren't getting credit. And here's more babies. This one is my favorite. Look at this guy. He has less hair than my dad does. I mean, these crowns, legit, really cool. I love the crowns that they added on top of the icons. But can we talk about how creepy this baby looks? He does not look like a baby. He looks like a miniature 60-year-old. This one also, he at least looks a little younger, like maybe he's 30 or something, but not a baby. It makes you wonder if any of these artists have ever seen babies before, honestly. So, something I want to bring up about the Byzantine art time period, as we know, it lasted 1,000 years, but there was an interruption. At one point in time in the year, so we have all this Byzantine art. For 1,000 years, people were making art like this in the Byzantine Empire. But then, around year 800, there was a new ruler in town, and he said, you know what, we're being kind of weird. It's like we're worshiping this art. I don't like it. We're gonna stop. Everybody get rid of the art. Everybody tear down the art that's in your churches. Stop making it. No more. It's not happening. But then, eventually, this king died. And you see, everybody had really liked Byzantine art. They really liked the icons and the mosaics. So the guy's dead, so what do you think they do? Oh, why did he come back? He's dead. Well, they brought it all back, and in fact, they made it better. So all of that other art, this one, they brought them back, they restored them, and the paint and the mosaics that they did make were even better than they were before. Now, we have, I've got 2 minutes left of my recording, so very quickly, I want you, knowing with your understanding from what we learned about Viking art last week and what we learned about Byzantine art this week, to identify the differences. Which one is migration or Byzantine? What is this one? Byzantine. What is this one? Byzantine. What is this one? Migration. It is made with fancy gems, but it's not a religious figure. It's just an animal, so it's migration. What is this one? Byzantine. What is this one? Migration. This is carved wood. The Byzantine people did not use wood. They used gems like this. Byzantine. What's this? Migration. We have a Viking boat. And so, what I want you to think about that is what about their art reflects their values and how they live. How is this the facts that the Vikings traveled so often change the materials that they used and the type of art that they made? And whereas the Byzantine people stayed in place for hundreds of years, they didn't move from their empire. They looked at their churches. They visited their churches. So keep in mind the features of a mosaic. They are usually cut precious stones, lots of gold. They have halos around their heads. Byzantine art is usually kind of weird looking, especially if there's a baby in it. And it's usually just part of them, the heads to about the hips. You will be creating your own little mosaic I'll be giving you instructions. You might want to pause here to look at this, and keep in mind that you want to make yours look like a Byzantine one.